All right, so background abstract animation thing. I've done these abstract background animation things a lot of times in a lot of my past videos, and there's not really a tutorial I can show you on how I did it, but I can show you tips and tricks to get a similar result really quickly and really easily. So I'm gonna break it down by showing you how I make mine so that you can make your own. The first thing right off the bat is that when it comes to these abstract things, I always want to make sure there's a variety of things going on. And it's very hard to kind of have that randomness if you're just kind of animating everything by keyframes and moving things around yourself. So, what I always do is I like adding some random clip, some random piece of footage, and I use that as my base layer before I add all the effects that eventually makes this colorful abstract piece. So I'm not even joking, this is what I do every time. I'm just gonna put in a clip I got from playing Halo. So here we've got a clip. Not much else to say besides that. You can literally use whatever you want as long as there's movement in the clip, because that will ultimately help create a lot of movement and variety in the effects that we're going to apply to it. So seriously, you use whatever you want. Like I said, I'm using a Halo clip because I edit a lot of Halo and I play a lot of Halo. But you could use whatever you want. You could use a clip from a game. You could use a video of your dog in the backyard. You could use literally anything. Seriously, I don't care. Not your mother. So there's pretty much 4 different effects that I like adding as kind of the starting point. And then I like manipulating them a lot to see if that's all I need or if I want to add more effects later. But there's 4 main effects that I use right off the bat to kind of get the look that I want for the most part. So the first one is Colorama. And I'll say all of these effects by themselves kind of look like doo-doo, like this one. Usually I like changing the color so it's a little more of this, so it is at least not as harmful to the eyes, but man, that is ugly by itself. And we're gonna manipulate a lot of this stuff later, maybe, depending. But I like layering the effects first. So the next effect that I'm gonna do is any sort of blur. I like using Gaussian blur just because it doesn't mess with my PC that much. I like camera lens blur a lot, but that doesn't bode well for my computer very much. So we're gonna use Gaussian blur, blah, blah, blur. And we're just going to crank this up, and we're kind of right now trying to get it to where there's movement going on, but you can't tell it's a game, which you want the movement, you want the variety of the colors, but you don't want it to look like a game or whatever footage you start with. So the next effect, and this was a very common one for doing this kind of randomness, is CC Kaleido. I don't know how to pronounce any of these names. You could also use Hextile. Hextile is a good one too, but I like using this one. Once you do that, you can immediately see, there we go. We've got quite a interesting looking thing. And we're just scrubbing through the timeline because, again, it's a piece of video footage. So it's playing, and when it's playing, there's things changing, and that is affecting the color and the shapes. So that's kind of where the abstract comes in. So if I play this, we've got this whole thing, which, again, could hurt your eyes. So we're going to have to change some of that, but this is the starting point. The other thing I like doing is I like using a distort, any of the distorts, but the one I like the most is turbulent displace, where you can pretty much just do whatever you want and make this as interesting as you want. And now you got this funky effect. And what you can do is you can keyframe like the evolution, so you can have it at 0, and by the end of the clip you've moved it a lot, so then when you're playing through, the turbulence also changes a little bit. Now, these are the 4 base effects that I use, and then from there I can manipulate them a lot. I can add a few other effects if I need be, but what I like the most is you can mess with this a lot and change this so it looks unrecognizable to what we're seeing right now just by moving the effects on top of each other or below each other, because this is a layer-based system, so it does matter where you put the effect. So for example, if I put the blur at the very end, the whole thing's blurred, but if I keep the blur where it is, or even move it a little bit more, now we've got a completely different look. If I move the turbulent displace, and that's the first thing, well, now we've got a much different look again. If I do the colorama at the end, nothing's going to happen because it's colorama. But if I move the turbulent displace above the blur and then had the CC color thing, now we have a completely different look. And with all of these, there's a lot of handles that you can change as well. So for example, again, we talked about turbulent displace. You can change that as much as you want. You want something to look more sharp and colorful, you can do that. You want to change the size so there's more of these shapes, you can mess with that. You want to mess with the rotation, so they're doing this kind of flower rotation thing, you can do that. It's kind of going to hurt your eyes, but you can do that. With the mirroring, this is a big one too that I like using. I'm going to just scale this up so you can see it better. The mirroring is a very useful thing, so pretty much it changes how, it's almost like a motion tile effect where it's like this box is the original footage and it's being mirrored again here, here, blah, blah, blah. The way it's mirrored right here is what this effect does, so you can change it. So for example, now it's a slightly different, it's actually just a sharp edge box. You could do a wheel and now it's cut up into different sections. My favorite is probably the flower, just because I think that it blends the best together, but I also really like Starlish, which also does something interesting. And you can mess with this a bunch of times. And that's pretty much the gist of how to do these abstract effects. What you can also do, just to add more movement, is you can add a offset effect, wherever it is, offset, and then you can have it kind of go to the left, go up and down with some keyframing. You could also add in a motion tile effect, and you can, you could scale that down. So I'm going to go 10 and 10, and now it's even smaller, and you could mess with that to keyframe it so it gets bigger, or you could even move this around like we did before. And now we've got, it almost looks like some of those like patterned quilts or psychedelic artwork you can get from places, I don't know. But that's some of the stuff you can do, and I haven't messed with this yet, but you could also simply either mess with the colorama, or you can add a hue and saturation effect and just keyframe the channel range, go to the end. I'm gonna change this by like 5, so it's rotating around the entire hue wheel 5 times, and now we've got it changing a whole bunch of times. And again, this is very, very bright and in your face, so you're gonna have to mess with that by messing with the brightness and the colorama and all that stuff. But those are some of the things you can do. Some other effects that I like adding every now and then, which could add a lot, is a distort wave warp, where you change the wave type to noise or smooth noise, and then you can hit all edges so you're not getting the edges to turn black. And now you've got this kind of noisy effect, and you can also move this around like before. So now you've got a little more detail. If you put it here again, you notice that it's a little more in your face, which maybe you want. Oh, here we go. Here's where you really notice it. It almost looks like it's a fur or something. I don't know. You can change that a lot. So now you have this crazy dark effect, and it's doing the same thing. And this is, again, just adding the effect and moving this up. Like, I'm just moving the height. You could move the width as well, and you've got this kind of crazy cool effect as well. So I really like adding that one. I'm actually going to leave that there, but I'm going to move this back to, what was it, 40? Maybe move this down a little bit. Another effect I like using is CC ball action, which I normally don't like using that much, but when you add it, depending on where it is in the layer, you can get some pretty cool stuff. So here we've got some kind of more pixelated looks, and it's actually kind of interesting how sometimes it just completely disappears. I'm wondering, oh wow, that's interesting. But yeah, you can do something crazy like this where you have this kind of cool, it almost looks like an old retro arcade game, and you could twist it or whatever. You could scatter it a little, so now it's got this kind of, just kind of messy thing. But again, you move it around a little bit and you're gonna get some different effects than what you had before. So I'm gonna keep moving it. Let's just see if it does anything. How about that? Yeah, let's mess with that. You can change the spacing, change the ball size to whatever. You can make it really small, so now you kind of have this really interesting thing. I don't even know, but that's another effect I like using. This sometimes can be really good. Sometimes it can mess with your system a lot, but CC glass can be really fun. You can mess with a lot, like kind of make this displace really interestingly. You can sometimes do that and move that around so it kind of does some cool stuff. Doesn't always. At least I've noticed it doesn't really do that much depending on what you're doing, but it can. It's just kind of things where you can just keep messing with this as much as you want. One thing I didn't mention with the motion tile, which could be fun too, is I think if you then add a rotate or a transform and then go to rotation, I think you can also get some cool, or maybe not. Or maybe you have to put it in front. There's something cool with this that I was going to show you, but now I can't remember what it is. Oh, here it is. I think you can rotate it. Yeah, when you rotate it under the motion tile, it'll do some crazy stuff. So if I get rid of the turbulence and the CC glass and this, there you go. When you rotate it, it can do some kind of crazy stuff here as well, which is also really fun. I really like how some of this can look, and I'm gonna at the blur here. Where was I? Yeah. But yeah, you can do some kind of fun stuff here as well. And some of this looks pixelated, but that's probably just because it's... Yeah, okay, it doesn't look as bad. I'm on quarter quality just so my computer can handle all this. But yeah, so that's something you can do too, which is really fun. But yeah, the whole point of this was pretty much to show you that you can pretty much create any sort of crazy, what looks like complicated animated sequence that you can have in the background of a video, and it does not take that much work to do. And it kind of helps too because, like I said before, some of the effects in After Effects just by themselves don't always look the best, but layering them a bunch and tweaking them ever so slightly actually does quite a bit. So really, you've got a lot that you can work with here, and you can pretty much make this whatever you want. Seriously, go wild. The world is your oyster.